Every school system has its share of dealing with tragic events and other unprecedented, unexpected occurrences. Could you tell us about a time when you had to call upon every tool in your personal and intellectual tool chest to help resolve a crisis, and what your approach would be to handle the situation, either from personal experience or hypothetically?
Well, we had a very traumatic case this year that we've been dealing with. It's an allegation of abuse by a teacher that occurred more than 15 years ago, but it's extremely distressing, very emotional issue that we've been dealing with, and it is tragic, and certainly it's kind of a potentially a once-in-a-career issue. So looking retrospectively at how we dealt with the crisis kind of in the moment, I think it really went back to relying on my leadership team as well as other members of our team to put our brains together and figure out how to effectively respond to it. I will say that I am truly a collaborator. I do not work in isolation. I don't like to work in isolation. We're in a vacuum. So when there's a crisis, you need to go to the brains, right? And so just think about your leadership team, think about your teachers, think about your faculty and staff. So we navigated this crisis as a team. I don't think I ever sat in my office alone trying to solve this problem or trying to navigate what was this traumatic experience. So I always rely on the expertise of those around me. Again, my success really comes directly from their abilities and their success. So I would definitely start with the team, but I'd also say I'm going to rely on my experiences. I have dealt with a lot of things in my career. I've been a superintendent for 16 years. I've been a public educator for 24. I've seen a lot. Up until this year, I might have said I've seen everything, and I've been proven wrong. I have not seen everything, but I do have experience. I've made mistakes, and I've learned from those mistakes to help inform my decision making to do better in the future. But I also rely on my network, right? So in the immediate aftermath, or kind of in the middle of this crisis, we had so many issues. We had media crisis, how to handle the media. We had personnel issues to contend with, all these things. I was able to tap into my network to help me navigate. Right? I was able to rely on whether it was Labor Council or a publicist that I had worked with in the past, or just my colleagues in another town who has gone through similar incidents. So with my experience, I'm able to tap into that network to help me navigate, because I still don't know. I almost said I still don't know what I'm doing, but I don't mean that. I still don't have all the answers, right? You learn and grow every day. So you sort of have to tap into people who know. So that was part of it. And then finally, I kind of had to rely on my instinct, my integrity, my courage. Thank you, Jim, for saying that. I had to act like a leader. I hope I did. That does come with experience. I had to rely on my communication skills. And I think there are some people who would probably disagree that we did a good job communicating. I would fundamentally really disagree with that. I actually take kind of pride that we gave as much information about the incident that we could, right? And that's a hard thing. And as it relates to communication, because I'm sitting here in front of you, I was in lockstep every single moment with my school committee. And that's really important. We are going to be partners. We're going to be teammates. And it's really important that you, as elected members of the school committee and elected representatives for your town, that you're also not only aware of what's going on, but you kind of fully understand the scope and kind of the magnitude. And so, I don't really draw lines in the sand about what we should or should not be sharing, but I just want you to know that as part of this crisis, there was a steady stream of communication and collaboration and partnering with my school committee. So when there's a crisis, you have to just use every tool in your toolbook and use every tool in someone else's toolbook.
So every school system has its share of dealing with tragic events and other unprecedented or unexpected occurrences. Could you tell us about a time when you had to call upon every tool in your personal and intellectual tool chest to help resolve a crisis, and what your approach would be to handle the situation, whether it's from personal experience or hypothetically?
Unfortunately, in this position, you have the opportunity to deal in tragic events and unprecedented occurrences. The approach we take in terms of emergency management, for example, you can look at the way that we investigate situations, that there is consistency through all buildings, working with police, working with fire, your first responders, so that there's predictability in terms of your first actions. That includes putting together, I've done this in Chelmsford, and it's an emergency communication handbook, and then like a handy cheat sheet for our principals, because how you communicate and being able to differentiate that communication for different audiences, as well as providing a minute-to-minute what happened in that event is quite vital. Could be a police investigation, could be a press conference later on. A specific example there, we had a staff member who was a daycare provider who at one of our elementary schools, who was a paraprofessional at the high school, who allegedly inappropriately touched one of the children in his care. And again, procedurally, I arrived at the school. We put that staff member on administrative leave for his safety as well as for the child. We engaged with the parents and had contacted the police, contacted our attorney, and had followed protocols. So the interview for that child was done appropriately, was eventually interviewed by the DA's office, and they have a special unit that interviews children in that particular type of situation. As we had gone through our investigation, because this staff member also worked in the summer, you're working with like 3 different administrations. You're working with the police, DA's office. Somehow that leaked out to the press. And so now you had parents who were concerned. And naturally, I have 2 of my own children, both are in graduate school, immediately concerned and upset as to why I didn't announce that there was an investigation, which, typically you don't. And so we had put together a press release saying that staff member was on paid administrative leave. However, I then turned to our town-wide PTO. And that became the start of a process where we worked with our elementary parents from all schools who had children in the summer program, as well as and worked with our counselors to develop, number one, an in-person FAQ, be able to ask questions, but also to start to provide resources for parents. It then turned into our connection with the Darkness to Light program and professional development and access for our parents around if they suspect their child's being abused. And then working with our staff, because this is one of their coworkers. And this is, it's a situation that you prepare for, but you never want to be able to use. And there are, unfortunately, more and more opportunities to be able to use those protocols. Communication is the key internally as well as externally.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we appoint John Antonucci as successor superintendent of the North Attleboro School District, subject to an agreement on terms of employment.
There's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second one.
Part of the attraction of Mr. Antonucci is he's battle tested, and he's got courage. And he was talking more philosophically. There's no line in the sand. I just appreciated him as a fit for North Attleboro more than Mr. Tinato. So that's why I made him up.
I love his enthusiasm for budgets because money is it's not my wheelhouse. It's not something that I really get excited about, especially budgets and all that stuff. But I loved his passion about building budgets and explaining it and breaking it down so that everybody understands it. I think is a wonderful thing, and so I was excited to hear that from him. So that was all mine.
When I looked at kind of Mr. Antonucci, I kind of feel like he really wants this job and wants to stay here. This is his last job. He's kind of showed that longevity. And Mr. Tiano, he's moved around a little bit, and no fault to his own, but I don't get the same thing that we may be in this process 3 to 4 years down the road. And, for the district, I think continuity is so important. And, especially like we saw with COVID, and it's no fault to the administration, but we're making all this progress with the district improvement plan, and then COVID hit and it just stopped. Well, that's going to the same thing. If we have a superintendent that's going in one direction, then, gets burnt out, and then we have to start all over again. So, when I look at what I think is best for the district, I think somebody like Mr. Antonucci is just going to be continuously there. And also, his budget skills seem phenomenal. And I think, when we look at what the issues in the town have been, I don't really find those issues, but when you hear people, it's all the school department doesn't know how to justify the money. He sounds like he has a plan on how to justify every cent we spend.
Dr. Tiano is a great candidate, and like I said, we'd be lucky to have either one. He did raise up one red flag when he said, well, I'm not really getting along with the elected leaders in my town, and I thought, well, what does that mean? But that being aside, I think Dr. Antonucci is the right choice for us, more similar to his district now, so I think he'll come in ready to go.
Motion passes 7-0. Dr. John Antonucci, pending contract negotiations, will be the North Attleboro new superintendent.